Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup video. Today we are covering the case of Albert Fish. Yeah. He was requested, so I figured I'm going to do it because it was requested. I know it's a well-known case, but hopefully I can sort of tell it from my perspective and give it my own little spin. This man, complete monster. And can we talk about the fact that this man also was grey? Like skin tone grey, eyes grey, hair grey, moustache grey. His clothes were probably grey, but I guess we'll never know. Like, I know all the photos are in black and white back in the day, but he still looks grey. So yeah, today the loser in Loserville is Albert Fish. He has no redeemable qualities, as none of these people do. If you do enjoy my videos, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday. But without any further rambling, any further ado, let's get on to the case of Albert Fish. So Albert Fish was originally born Hamilton Howard Fish, and he was born in Washington DC on May the 19th, 1870. He's old. Well, he's dead now, but he was old to us. Now, he was a son to Randall and Ellen Fish, and as a child, Albert would greatly struggle with his mental health, but within his family, mental health issues, severe mental illness was not unheard of. So Albert's brother was actually in a mental asylum for his severe mental illness. His uncle had also been diagnosed with mania, and his mother would suffer from audible and visual hallucinations. Now, Randall Fish, he was 75 years old when Albert was born, so like, he's an oldie. And he was 43 years older than Ellen, Albert's mum. Now listen, everyone says it was a different time back then, age didn't matter, but like 43 years older. Like, that age difference, not one I can get on board with, right? But anyway, so he was 75 when Albert was born, and he wound up passing away when Albert was just 5 years old. So he died when he was 80. So Albert only got 5 years with his father. Now Ellen, once Randall had passed away, she was like, do you know, I just cannot deal with all these children. I'm not cut out for it. I'm struggling myself. So I'm going to put them in the orphanage. So Albert and his siblings, they wound up in a state orphanage, and it was during this time within the orphanage that Albert would develop an obsession and a liking to all things pain. Yeah. Now, you may be wondering, like I was at the start, he was born Hamilton Howard Fish, so why are we calling him Albert? Well, let me tell you a little story about our boy Albie. He had a sibling that had passed away, and his sibling's name was Albert. And Hamilton, Albert Fish, but at this point Hamilton Howard Fish, he did not like his name, because when he was in the orphanage, the other children would refer to him as ham and eggs. Yeah, ham and eggs. It's quite funny. But he hated this, right? It made his life miserable. So he at one point was like, you know what? Albert's available. There's a vacancy to be filled in the name Albert, so I'm going to take it. And then he became Albert Fish. Now, disgustingly, the caretakers within this orphanage, they would regularly beat the children in this orphanage. It's absolutely vile. All these children were also encouraged to beat each other, like hit each other, abuse each other, and the caretakers would watch. Now, all of these children were living in absolute fear and terror of when the next beating would occur, or who was going to attack them next, because is it going to be the caretaker or one of the other orphans? So yeah, all these children lived in absolute fear. All these children, except from Albert. He loved a good beating, right? He loved it. So at this very young age, Albert begins to associate pain with pleasure, and later on in life, this would be his only way to get any sexual gratification, would be from pain, from a good beating, you know? Now, by the 1880s, Albert's mum, she's got herself a good job, and she's handling her mental health a lot better than she ever has. So she decides that she's going to have Albert removed from the orphanage. Now, Albert Fish, he's out the orphanage, you know, living life, although now there's no one to administer his beatings. So he thinks, you know what, I'm gonna beat myself up. No harm, no foul, I'll beat myself up. And I don't know how you beat yourself up, but it's very much giving Liar Liar with Jim Carrey in the bathroom.
I'm kicking my ass, do you mind?
Now, by 1882, Albert, just aged 12, he gets into a very, very toxic relationship with a telegraph boy. Now, this boy, he would go on to introduce Albert to urolagnia and coprophagia. Now, if you're anything like me, who doesn't really know too many big words, that is basically the consumption of human waste. Feces, urine, human waste in general. Disgusting. Now, Albert Fish, he went on to go to the public baths at the weekends, and this is where he would spend the majority of his weekends. And I know what you're thinking, like, is it swimming baths or is it public baths where people can shower and, you know, stuff like that? I don't know, but all he knows is that there's going to be young boys there getting undressed, so he is very much there to witness the undressing. He's not there to get fit, he's not there to, you know, brush up on his hygiene. He's there for the worst reasons. Now, Albert's sadomasochistic tendencies and obsessions, they would only further escalate. Albert became very into and obsessed with self-mutilation, one of his favourite pastimes. Now, it wasn't just self-mutilation, it was sexual self-mutilation. Now, Albert, his favourite thing to do is take needles and embed them into his abdomen, his groin, his testicles, and the little bit of skin between your butthole and your pee-pee or vagina. He would embed needles into those areas, and at one point he wound up with 29 needles showing in those regions. Could you imagine being behind this guy at airport security? You would never get through. You would never get through. That man will beep and beep and beep and beep. No matter if he takes off his belt, his shoes with buckles, we will be there forever. Another favourite of Albert's was to spank himself with a nail-studded paddle. You know, just really inflict that pain to get that pleasure. Now, by 1890, Albert is 20 years old and he decides to move to New York City, the Big Apple, the city of dreams. Now, he moved there and he started to engage in male prostitution. Now, with doing that, Albert would also go on to molest and rape vulnerable young boys. Now, the majority of these young boys, when I say young, I mean they are young. Most of them would be under 6 years old, which is absolutely vile. Now, Albert would tend to lure these young boys from their homes and he would proceed to rape and torture them using various devices, one of them being his favourite weapon, the nail-studded paddle. I apologise if you can hear children singing outside. Young Beyonce is about to get me copyrighted. Please stop. Now, in 1898, Albert would wind up marrying a woman that his mum had introduced him to. Now, some sources say that this was basically like an arranged marriage. Others claim that they had met and chosen that they like each other and that they wanted to get married. But I mean, the black and white point here being that some poor woman has married this nail lover. This nail and needle lover has a wife. Now, Albert Fish, he would go on to have 6 children with his wife, and the worst thought that came into my mind was, oh my god, like, did he go ahead and rape and torture his own children? Sources claim, and Albert also claimed, that he never ever abused his own children or raped his own children, but he would continue to abuse and rape children in the neighbourhood. Albert, in 1910, he had went on to become a house painter in Delaware, and it was at this point that he met Thomas Kedden. Now, Albert and Thomas Kedden, they would go on to develop a sadomasochistic relationship with each other. Now, they would engage in sadomasochistic sexual activities, although it's not confirmed just how much of this was consensual. Now later on, Albert would actually go on to claim that Thomas Kedden was intellectually disabled. He was just really taking advantage of this boy. Now listen, just 10 days after their first meeting, Albert lured Thomas Kedden to an abandoned farmhouse, and once Thomas Kedden arrived, he would lock him in there for 2 weeks, raping and torturing Thomas Kedden. Now, Albert proceeded to mutilate Thomas Kedden's body, and he also cut off half of his penis. Now, Albert said his original plan was to cut up Thomas Kedden's body and take it home, but he said due to the hot weather, he's not going to do that. So instead, what Albert Fish done was pour peroxide over Thomas Kedden's wound, and then he wrapped it up in a Vaseline covered handkerchief. I do not know what he was doing, but it was not good. Now, after Albert had wrapped up Thomas's wound, he gave him $10 and then quickly took off. When sort of like recalling this incident later, Albert had said, "I shall never forget his scream or the look that he gave me." He enjoyed this stuff. He was so sadistic. I know I keep saying it, but he was sadistic beyond belief. Now, by 1917, Albert Fish's severe mental illness was too far gone now. His wife ended up leaving him for another man, and apparently this was a man who had boarded in their house, so was kind of lodging with them at some point. She left him for him, and as you can imagine, this only forced Albert's mental health to go on a further decline. But I am just so glad that his wife got out of that situation. She should have left him long time ago. He was a dangerous, horrible, sadistic, evil man. Now listen, at this point, Albert is spiralling even more than he had before. I mean, this man cannot stick enough needles in his abdomen, and at this point as well, he was also covering cotton wool in lighter fluid and then shoving it into his anus and then lighting it on fire. Literally setting a fire in his ass, you know? Now, he was also having auditory hallucinations at this point, and at one point he wrapped himself up in a carpet like a burrito, like that burrito type wrap, and he said that he done this because John the Apostle had came to him and told him to wrap himself up in the carpet. Yeah. Now, Albert Fish goes on to want to impart some of his wisdom on his own children. So he starts to teach his children sadomasochistic games and activities that they could play. Now, this would be just before Albert developed his obsession with cannibalism, but he would teach his children his sadomasochistic games. He introduced his children to his nail-studded paddle, and he would also invite the children and the children's friends to spank him with the nail-studded paddle. Now, when Albert's obsession for cannibalism grew, he would start off by eating raw meat before sort of excelling into, the human flesh. And when he was eating this raw meat, he would invite his children to partake. I don't know if they did. I couldn't find any confirmation that they did, and I hope they didn't, but they might have. And then by 1919, Fish's obsession with cannibalism, torture, that just continued to escalate further, and at this point he was also contemplating murder. Yep. Now, disgustingly, Albert Fish would want to target the most vulnerable group of children that he could think of. So at first he was looking for intellectually disabled orphans, and he was also targeting Black African American homeless children, and he later stated that he targeted these individuals because he believed that they would not be missed. And this stuff sickens me. This whole case sickens me, but don't you ever say that someone of a certain ethnicity, or if someone's disabled, etc., do not say that they wouldn't be missed, because that's a lie. The only person that will not be missed is you, on your elevator to hell. See ya. Now, later on, Albert would try to state that the reason he wanted to kill these children was because God was commanding him to do so. Yeah, I'm sure he was, Albie. You live in a fantasy land, honestly. You're just disgusting, evil, and you won't be missed. So at one point, Albert, he starts looking at like newspaper ads. He's looking for, you know, young boys who are looking for work, or he's also advertising work that he needs done and that he's hiring employees for. Didn't need any work done, right? This is all just a big fat ruse. So of course, Albert, he is looking through all these ads, and then on the 25th of May 1928, he sees one that really catches his eye. So the ad that Albert had seen was from a young 18-year-old boy by the name of Edward Budd. He was looking for some work, trying to earn some money. So Albert sees this and immediately he gets excited. So, disgustingly, Albert, he actually goes to visit the Budd family in Manhattan, and he says this is because he was looking to possibly hire Edward. He just wanted to have a chat with him, you know, see what he was like, scope him out for the work. This was his pretense, and his other pretense was that his name was Frank Howard. Another big lie. Now this Frank Howard said that he was a farmer from Farmingdale, and he basically was looking to hire Edward and possibly his friend to do some work on the farm. So everything goes well. Albert says he will send for Edward and his friend in a couple of days. A couple of days go by and Albert doesn't show up, but a telegram comes through, and it's basically an apology from Frank Howard saying that there's been a bit of a delay and he will send for them at a later date. So the day comes around where Albert goes to the Budd household. He's looking for Edward and his friend. When Albert gets there, he is greeted by 10-year-old Grace Budd, also referred to as Gracie, and I hate saying this name because that's my little sister's name and we call her Gracie as well, which just feels so wrong, but he's greeted by 10-year-old Gracie Budd, and in this moment he forgets about Edward. Edward is no longer his sole focus. Actually, Edward is not his focus at all. He wants Gracie Budd. Albert goes on to tell the Budd family that he was actually on his way to his niece's birthday party and that Gracie Budd would probably really enjoy herself, so she should come. Now, devastatingly, Albert Fish was able to convince Delia and Albert Budd to let their daughter go with him, and they would never see their daughter ever again after this day. So Albert takes 10-year-old Grace Budd and he takes her to a house upstate. Now, at this point, Albert goes inside and he gets himself completely naked. Now, he says the reason that he got himself completely naked was so he wouldn't get any blood on his clothes, because he knows what he's going to do to Gracie Budd. Now, at this point, Gracie Budd is outside. She is playing in the yard and she's picking some wild flowers. Albert then proceeds to shout Gracie Budd into the house once he was stripped down. He then went to hide in the closet, waiting on Gracie Budd to enter the room, and when Gracie Budd entered the room, Albert Fish jumped out on her and scared her, and of course he was completely naked, and Gracie Budd, when she seen him, she was horrified. She screamed and she tried to run away to get downstairs to exit the house, but Albert was too quick and he was able to grab Gracie Budd. Now, this is all too much, sounding a bit like Larry Jean Bell at this point, because Albert Fish would go on to send the Budd family a letter. Now, this letter is downright disgusting, heinous, vile. I can't even tell you the words to describe this letter. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from the letter, and I do apologise in advance for what I'm about to say because it's completely vile and heartbreaking. So in the letter, Albert stated, "First, I stripped her naked. How did she kick, bite and scratch? I choked her to death. Then I cut her into small pieces so I could take the meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body." How can you be so vile to speak about To speak about anyone like that, but to speak about a 10-year-old girl like that and send it to her family, like, I just, like, I said today I wasn't going to get emotional when I'm, like, telling these cases, but I don't know. The paper that Albert Fish was writing on, it was stationery from a company. Now, the stationery was from New York's Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. So police go on, they inquire with this company regarding stationery, and they're able to uncover that the paper was left behind by a janitor from the company at the rooming houses that he was staying at. Now, at this rooming house was Albert Fish. And he had a very, very strong resemblance to Frank Howard. How's that? Oh wait, because it's Albert Fish. Now, the police immediately identify him as Grace Budd's kidnapper, and they set up an interview right away. Now, police, before they go in to interview Albert Fish, they're getting themselves hyped up, like, come on boys, let's get in there, let's nail him, let's make sure we've got concrete evidence to just hit him with, get a confession out of him eventually, let's just stick with it. And when they go in the room, they are shooketh when Albert Fish just comes straight out and confesses to kidnapping and murdering 10-year-old Grace Budd. They had prepared a whole spiel and he just gave it up. Now, what's so sick about this is police said it was almost like Albert could not wait to delve into the details of what he had done to Grace Budd and many other children. Now, what's even more devastating is the fact that he confessed to all these different murders, yet only 3 could be concretely linked to Albert. So on February the 11th, 1927, 4-year-old Billy Gaffney was out playing in his Brooklyn neighbourhood with some of the neighbourhood children. It was at this point when he was playing in the neighbourhood that he would be taken. Now, one of the neighbourhood children that he was playing with would later confirm that he believed Billy had been taken by the boogeyman. Now, the little boy who witnessed the abduction of Billy was 3 years old, and he described the boogeyman as an elderly man of a slim build with grey hair and a grey moustache. Now, for some reason, because of the boy's age, police decide, we're not going to take that seriously, sorry. And they are searching the neighbourhood. Billy does not turn up because he has in fact been taken by the man that 3-year-old said. Fair enough, he's not the boogeyman. I mean, he kind of is, right? But I suppose in fact he's not. But the 3-year-old was right, he had been taken. Why does it matter if a 3-year-old has referred to this evil man as the boogeyman? So at this point they decide to confirm that Billy has in fact been abducted, and devastatingly, Billy would never ever be seen again. Now, after Albert Fish was arrested, a man had came forward. So this man was a motorman on the Brooklyn trolley line, and he confirmed that Albert was the nervous old man that he had seen with a young boy on the day of Billy Gaffney's disappearance. Now, this man had claimed that he witnessed Albert trying to silence the young boy that he was with, and heartbreakingly, this young boy was crying for his mum, which honestly just breaks my heart. Like, into a million pieces to think in this moment all this little boy wants is his mum, and evil is sat right beside him. Now, the boy's crying and this man witnesses Albert just pull the boy off the trolley and abduct him. Just let me clarify that this is no one's fault but Albert Fish's, but I just wish, like, when something strange is going on, please report it, like, risk offending people if it means a life could be saved, okay? Now, Albert Fish, he would admit to kidnapping and murdering young Billy Gaffney, and sickeningly, he stated the following. Albert said, "I took tools, a good heavy cat of 9 tails, homemade, short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these halves into 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his beard behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear. I gouged out his eyes. He was then dead. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. Truly disgusting. If anybody's not aware, by the way, a cat o' nine tails is like a whip that usually has 9 tails, so 9 different bits of leather hanging off it. And this is what he used on 4-year-old Billy Gaffney. And what hurts my heart even more is that Billy Gaffney's body was never ever found. So his family didn't even get to give him a proper burial. Also on July the 14th, 1924, a young boy who was 9 years old by the name of Francis McDonnell would vanish whilst he was playing with his brother and his friends in Port Richmond, Staten Island. Now, once the boy was reported missing, a search was conducted and harrowingly they found this young 9-year-old's body hanging from a tree. Now, the tree that he was found hanging from was actually located in a wooded area that was very, very close to his home, and it was confirmed that he had been strangled with his own suspenders and he had been sexually assaulted. Now, the autopsy conducted on Francis McDonnell would confirm severe lacerations to his legs and his abdomen. Now, it was also noted that his left hamstring had been almost completely stripped of all flesh. Now, Albert Fish later claimed that his original plan was actually to castrate the little boy, and before he could do this, he was disturbed by a noise of someone approaching the area, so he fled. Francis's friends did confirm that he had been taken by an old man who was slender and had a grey moustache, and very similarly a neighbour in the area said that they had seen a very similar looking man with Francis walking down a grassy path toward the wooded area which Albert had taken him to. Now, the murder of Francis McDonnell would actually go unsolved right up until the time of Grace Budd's murder. At this point is when people were able to identify Albert as being the man who had taken Francis McDonnell. Now, it's funny because everyone refers to Albert Fish as this grey looking man, and my god, like, I completely agree. Like, fair enough, the photos back then, they're black and white, but he looks grey. Hair's grey, skin tone's grey, his eyes look grey, his hair's grey, his moustache is grey. Like, he looks grey. I never even knew that grey could be a skin tone, but here we are, Albert Fish, he made it a thing. At first, Albert tries to deny any involvement with the rape or murder of Francis McDonnell. Let me guess, Albert, was it Patricia? However, shortly before Albert's execution and death, he did later admit that it was in fact himself who had raped, tortured and murdered poor Francis McDonnell. Now, once this confession had been made public, the New York Daily Mirror, they had basically said that this confession just solidified his reputation that he had received as the worst child slayer in criminal history. So the trial of Albert Fish started on March the 11th, 1935, and of course it was quickly discovered that Albert Fish was absolutely insane. So his defence had pleaded innocent by reason of insanity. They said that there was no way he would have been in sound or sane mind when he committed these crimes. Fish had then went on to explain that it was the voices in his head that told him to brutalise, torture, rape and murder these children. So multiple psychiatrists throughout Albert Fish's trial, they did agree that he was in fact insane and they did support the insanity plea. However, the jury, these are my people, the jury weren't having it. They were like, yeah, okay, you might be insane. You're sane enough that when you committed those murders, you knew what you were doing. And they went on to find him guilty. So Albert's trial did last 10 days and the verdict would go on to be that Albert would be sentenced to death by electrocution the following year. And honestly, that is exactly what that man needed. He just needed taking off our planet, you know? Like, what an evil, horrible, wicked, sadistic, ugly, grey man. Now, during Albert Fish's time on, I suppose, death row, he was permitted to write notes regarding the crimes that he committed. Now, the real reason for this was so reporters who were reporting on the cases could give details firsthand of what had actually occurred, and they thought because it was a first-hand account of the crimes that this would entice more readers to read the article. I don't know how I feel about that. I want people to be aware of the crimes and of this horrific man and remember the victims, but to say like, oh, to entice the readers kind of sounds like they are looking at it from a fame aspect. Now, before his execution, Fishy's attorney, Jack Dempsey, he had looked over his notes of what he had written up. Now, he took one look at these notes and glancing over them, he was able to decide at that point that they were far too sick and twisted to ever be shared with the public. Jack Dempsey would go on to state, "I will never show this to anyone. It was the most filthy string of obscenities that I have ever read." Then on January the 16th, 1936, Albert Fish would enter the execution chamber at 11:06 p.m. and he would be pronounced dead 3 minutes later. Now, apparently, it's not confirmed, but apparently his last words were, "I don't even know why I'm here." Like, you idiotic fool. What do you mean you don't know why you're here? You're a murderer, you're a rapist, you torture and kill children. That's why you're here. Honestly though, like, Albert Fish was twisted. Now, people did say that he died with 3 electric volts, and they believe that his needles and his balls maybe sped that whole process up, but I don't know. But that's the case, Albert Fish. What a loser. But of course, that is the end of another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. When I say enjoyed, I just mean I hope you found it interesting, I hope I done it some justice, and I hope I brought the victims to your attention and just help keep their voices alive as well. When it is these more well-covered cases, I'm always a bit scared to do them just because I don't know what else I can possibly add. But when I've said that before, you guys have said that it's not really about what else I can add, it's more about how I'll tell the case from my perspective. So if there is well-known cases that you want, please, you know, request them. Someone has requested Ted Bundy and I was really wary to do that, but I think I will. If that's what you want, I'll do it. Before you go, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Turn the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. British Standard Time. Down below you will find my social media handles along with my email where you can email me case suggestions or just leave them in the comments if you would prefer. If you want details of anything that I've used on my face today, they will also be linked down below with a direct link if there's anything you want to purchase. They're not affiliate links, by the way, I don't make money off of them, but I just put them there because it's helpful if you want to check anything out. But I hope you enjoyed. Don't be a bad person, be a good person, look after each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!